Hello everyone, and welcome to my quick guide to the reworked Corki. As you guys know, the new split started last week, and with it, obviously, the Corki rework, which is a pretty big change to the champ. So in this video, I want to kind of give you guys my initial thoughts on it, how you should build it, how you should play it, etc. So first off, I'll talk about kind of what Corki is at the moment. So Corki is designed, I think, as both a mid and a bot laner right now. He's much stronger in the early game, he's much better at skirmishing, but he's much more auto-attack focused. So he's a bit shorter range than he was before, he's not quite as good a neutralizer as he was before. And I would say in general, his hard counters actually became harder now, but also he can win a lot more matchups than he did before. And I'd say overall, a big buff to Corki in solo queue. And I think you'll find that he is one of the more powerful AD mids on the patch. I'd say probably a top 3 AD mid at the moment, especially because he has a dash as well, which is very, very valuable. So definitely a champ that, because he's relatively easy, is worth picking up and putting some time into. So I'll start by talking about the runes, because I think there's a couple different pages you can do. So what I've been doing is 2 different pages. I've been going first strike against melee, and I've been going fleet against ranged. That's as a general rule. Now, you can go first strike against ranged if you want, but it's going to be more difficult to proc on cooldown, and you might find the lane a little more difficult. That fleet movement speed and that fleet healing is kind of nice. But the thing is, if you can get away with first strike, I think you should. It is very, very powerful. Now, I will say there's also a PTA page. I didn't really like this. I kind of felt that every time I could take PTA, I'd rather just take first strike, but it is something you can do. Now, if you're taking the first strike page, what I would recommend is going, well, first strike. I will probably take cashback. This is kind of up to you. So if you go for magical boots, this allows you to rush out your first item quicker. And that is pretty important on Corki, right? That first item spike, and I'll get to items, is pretty important. But the thing I don't like about that is there are a lot of matchups in mid where you might need boots early. That being said, you know, you could swap this over, right? Like maybe in a matchup where you do need boots, you go for cashback. In a matchup where you don't need boots early, you go for magic footwear, right? That's fine as well. Cashback definitely outperforms as the game goes on, and it's especially useful at helping you hit kind of your 3 and 4 item spikes. But I think, yeah, honestly, you can go either. I think it's kind of personal preference on this. Cashback if you don't really want to think about it. For the next one, this can change a little bit. So I think something that Corki struggles with a little bit in the early game is mana. Especially before you have like an Essence Reaver or a Mana Mune or whatever you're going with. And I think Biscuits help a lot with that. If you can manage your mana well, though, sometimes it can be good to go Time Warp Tonic. This isn't an amazing rune, right? Because if you kind of think about it, you know, you're going to have 2 pots or like 2 refillables, and it's just giving you a bit more sustain. But that can make the difference between getting poked out or not. Triple Tonic is probably the weakest of the options, but it's still not bad. Obviously, it gives you a little bit more gold at level 3. And also that skill point at level 9, which is kind of nice. So I think I default to Biscuits, but again, something you can take there. Take Cosmic 100% of the time. And then for your secondaries, I tried a few things with First Strike. So there's 2 kind of ways to get scaling. If you want to go like scaling damage, you can go for something like this, right? Absolute Focus Gathering Storm. If you want scaling tankiness, you can go for something like this, like Conditioning Overgrowth. Personally, though, I actually found the best page was to go Absorb Life and Alacrity. So Absorb Life's actually pretty strong at the moment. And the reason I really like it is because it helps you provide extra sustain, especially because you're not taking fleet. Now, I will say, if you're worried about getting poked out on the first base, then you probably don't want to take this, right? Because this rune isn't really that useful until kind of like your second or maybe even third base. So it's more of like a later stage of lane and more towards the mid game where you're starting to farm camps, and having that extra sustain is really nice. And I really like that overall. But I will say that, like, you really need to know that you're getting value out of this, I guess. Like, if you're not using the extra health to farm camps or stay on the map or whatever, you're probably better off just taking something like this and getting a little bit more scaling. Now, I will also talk about the fleet page. So when you're going fleet, you can come here. And again, you can kind of mix and match depending on if you want more mana early or not. And I will talk about this a little bit in just a sec. So anyway, default to Absorb Life. You can go either Alacrity or Bloodline here. I would probably go Bloodline, although if you think you already have enough sustain with Absorb Life and Fleet, then easy enough to go Alacrity. Generally, I go Cut Down. I think Cut Down is a really good rune right now, so I go for that. Now, if you're taking this page, I would almost certainly take Inspiration, and I would either go for Cosmic Biscuits, or I would go for maybe Boots Biscuits. I think having the extra mana, again, kind of required. But Cosmic's really nice, so I like to take that. Now, one thing is, if you're in a very difficult lane, right, chances are you're against a ranged champ, things are hard, you're taking fleet, you might want to take Resolve and go second wind just for the additional sustain. That would be like your strongest early game page in terms of surviving, and it gives you a lot of sustain right between Absorb Life and second wind, but this is definitely weaker on the scaling side. So one thing I'll quickly talk about before I go to the items is that Getting mana on this champ is kind of important, and if you aren't building a mana item early, so let's say you're building a Triforce or something, which I'll get to, you probably want to go double mana route. You probably want to go something like Presence of Mind and Biscuits to kind of help you get through that. That being said, if you are building something like an Essence Reaver, or you're building something like a Tier, even though these do help you early game, they essentially become, like, they're not even runes anymore, right? Like, after you complete your first items. So that can still be worth it, right? Like, if you really decide that, okay, well, I really just need to get through that early game, like, you can do that, and that's all good. But personally, I find that if I am going for mana items, I try and drop at least one of these because, yeah, I think having a bit more scaling is better. So yeah, to not overcomplicate it, just go for first strike versus melee and maybe easier range matchups and fleet versus everything else, and you should be pretty all good. Now, coming over the items, I'll show you some of the builds that I've been doing. So personally, what I've found to be the most successful, if you can get away with it, is to go for Essence Reaver into IE, into like Rapid Fire or LDR. I think that's the highest damage build. And again, if you can get away with it, that's what you should be going. Now, the difficulty of this is that Essence Reaver has a terrible build path. It's honestly just awful, and it's going to make your early game kind of weak. So if you want to go Essence Reaver, you kind of need to know that you're going to be able to get good enough bases that you can actually buy things like a BF sword on a base, or that you're going to have enough gold income from extra kills or plates or first strike or whatever to help you get through this period without falling too far behind. Because if you invest too much, or if you lose too much, I suppose, trying to invest into that Essence Reaver, it's going to be bad, right? And so, like, you kind of want to look for ways to where maybe you could save some gold, right? Like, maybe this game, I didn't actually watch this game back, but, you know, maybe I'm buying too many pinks, right? And that's making my Essence Reaver late, or something like that, right? It's very, very important that you shorten this time to Essence Reaver because it's, again, such a terrible first item. But once you get it, it means that you're going to get your double crit spike on 2 items, and it builds very smoothly into everything else. So this is the build I like the most, if you can get away with it. Boot options, really just game dependent. Berserker Greaves are the most damage. You don't build Sorks anymore. And you can also go like Swifties or Mercs if you need them. I wouldn't go Tabi, but yeah, there's some boot options. Default to Berserker Greaves, and you can just sit on tier 1 boots for a while as well. That's an option, and just rush out your crit items. Now, another build that I think is good is the Triforce build. So this is something I did down here, where you go for Triforce, i.e. into, you can go to Rapid Fire. You could go Essence Reaver here, but I think you probably don't need it. I would probably go, yeah, Triforce, i.e. Rapid Fire. Now, the good thing about this is that Triforce has a much better build path. And if you're in a difficult matchup, you know, the ability to rush health early is very nice. Also, the Sheen is quite good for trading. So overall, it's a better first item spike on the way there. But your 2 items, I would say, are weaker than Essence Reaver IE. And it does make building after that a little more awkward. And one big weakness of this build is mana. So you can buy a tier if you want, and then go for a mana mune. So you can go something like tier, Triforce, mana mune IE. I think this slows down your crit way too much, and so I was trying to get away with just having Presence and Biscuits and trying to just manage my mana. That is something you can look for, and definitely an option you should consider if you're in a more difficult matchup where you need those spikes. Now, other things that I have tried a little bit of is there are some lethality Corki builds, so there are a couple different ones. So there's the one where you go for Tier and Profane Hydra. There's also one where you go for Double Dirk and just rush out 2 lethality items. These are pretty decent, but overall, I found that in every situation I'd kind of be thinking about that. I kind of felt like I could just go for Essence Reaver IE instead. I suppose the time you'd go for that is if you really need to crush the early game, and you can, yeah, look for something like that and just really snowball. That is something you could look for. Personally, I didn't really try enough lethality builds yet to say whether or not it's like actually, you know, better all the time or not. I think situationally it's definitely good, but for now, I think I kind of found my Essence Reaver IE build to be better. That being said, you know, I didn't test the lethality builds that much. Is there anything else? I think one other thing is that you always max E on this champ now. So E max is a ton of damage early, and it also gives you a lot of wave clear. One thing about the Q max is Q still does magic damage, but you're not building Sorks anymore because there's no other magic damage really in your kit. So I think overall, like, Q max is just weaker. So you're going to max E, then Q, then W. But other than that, there's not really too much to do with the setup. Like I said, it's fairly basic. So I'll quickly show you guys some lane gameplay, just to kind of explain what I'm thinking. So this here is a game that I played yesterday on stream, which was Corki versus Lux mid. And this is definitely going to be one of your more difficult ones, right? Like, Lux is the champ that's quite strong in lane. She's got the Comet as well. So in this matchup, I decided to go for Fleet and the Absorb Life. And that's going to allow me to sustain up a lot. You can see very early in the lane, one thing that you can do on Corki is just either force fights with people level 1 with your E, or just use it to push the wave. It's very, very difficult for people to contest Corki's wave clear, as well as Corki's trading in the early games. So that's kind of like a cheese way to get priority in some of these matchups. Now, if you can, obviously try and use your fleet movement speed in order to dodge as many skill shots as you can. It's going to be nice. And if you ever can punish your opponent for using cooldowns by Wing into them or, trying to poke them out or whatever, that can be good. Like here, if she uses Q like that, potentially that could be a window for you to dash in. Depending on how strong the enemy champ is early, right? One thing to remember is like you'll probably have the sustain advantage over most champs. So like you can afford to kind of take some, fairly mediocre trades and still come out on top. So just kind of skim through this. Like I said, I don't want to make this too long, but here, for example, she uses all her cooldowns. So I can just take a trade with my E. Didn't want to W in just because the creep wave was too big. But honestly, maybe I could have, right? Like just because of my sustain. So generally as Corki, you're kind of expecting to... You're not really expecting like a huge lead pre-first base, but you generally will actually force your opponent to recall first unless they're playing some really strong lane bully, like an Orianna or a Syndra or something. So yeah, if you can get these kind of favorable trades, again, you can see like you don't use much mana on Corki in the early game, like you do when you come to skirmishing, right? Because as you can see, like your W especially is very costly. But if you're just poking out the wave with E, and because you're not maxing Q, there's honestly not that much point throwing it out for poke. Really, all you're doing is just spamming E. So you should be able to manage your mana decently in the 1v1. It's when you come to skirmishes that it can really suck. But you can see I deal like a ton of damage here. One thing that makes her really strong in the early game as well is if you notice the E shreds resistances. If you pay attention to Lux's armor and MR up here, starts at 33. I don't believe I get the entire full channel W or E on her. As you can see, right, like I've got her resistances all the way down to 18, which means I'm hitting her insanely hard. Plus, I have 15% true damage on my autos. So I'm just hitting her incredibly hard. And now in this game, I went for Merc Shreds Rush because I was against double AP mid jungle. But yeah, you can kind of see, right, that like over and over, I'm just trying to force trades with her when I can. If you do end up like way ahead of your opponent in terms of items, it's very easy to just W forward into your opponent. I'll try to find you an example of that. Get another kill just a bit later. So I know at some point I just kind of get strong enough that I can just like immediately, W onto her and it's really good. So yeah, like this. So at this point I had a big enough item advantage as well as 4 points in E and I was up a level when I first started this trade. And that just means you can honestly just force trades with your opponent, right? This is something you would never do on old Corki. But honestly, you have a base stat advantage over most champs already. And so if you do manage to get, again, some early game power, whether that's a BF sword or some resistances or whatever, you'll tend to come out on top. So that's probably all I really need to show you in terms of kind of like how you want to play this champ. I guess like when it comes to mid game and stuff like that, you do generally just play like a front to back auto attacker, right? It's just the same as really any other AD carry. There's not much to be said there. I suppose the most important thing, maybe the most different thing, is just to make sure that you're trying to farm camps on side lane. That's something that's really nice about having the Essence Reaver and Absorb Life combo, is that you're always going to be high on HP, and that's going to allow you to clear camps. So if I just skip to like, I don't know, later in the game here, like when I'm starting with Darius, yeah, like maybe here when I'm going out in side lane, right? Like the combination of Absorb Life plus Essence Reaver mana. Oh, doing a lot of dying. Anyway, it means that you should have enough sustain in order to farm waves and any camps that are nearby, right? Because you just have so much sustain, which is pretty good. And any additional camps that you can take on a champ like Corki is really, really nice. You've got the DPS for it. You've got the sustain for it. You're never going to run out of mana. And again, super good to have high uptime on this champ because you can always use it for something. Again, like hitting side lane towers or farming camps or whatever. That's kind of important to look out for in the mid game to see if there's any team fights I can quickly show you. Skip along here. Do we have any big ones? Maybe this one here. Can't really remember this fight. Oh yeah, I remember this one. So as you can see, I kind of just like play with my other AD carry, just kind of peeling back, getting DPS on this Darius. And then if they do overextend, if they do use their cooldowns, that can be a time for you to go forward. So yeah, like I said, I just wanted to make a quick guide on it. I will not say I've mastered the Corki rework yet, and I probably will do a full in-depth guide on it at some point if there's enough interest in it. That being said, I don't think the champ is super hard to play. And since now he actually plays more similar to other AD carries, people will probably find him easier to play than before. Before he was like a little unique in that he played kind of similar to poke champs, but most people picked up Corki like wanting an AD carry. This is a bit weird in that sense. But anyway, let me know what you guys thought of having the quick guide. Again, this isn't really meant to be a replacement for the long guides. It's just more so that I don't wait a month before I post any sort of Corki content. By then, having like fully mastered it or whatever. I just wanted you guys to have an idea of if you want to play Corki, especially given my tier list, I put him quite high. This is how to do so. So if you have any comments, please leave them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Come check out my stream on twitch.tv/ShockLol. I've been streaming pretty much every day all of the new season, and there are yeah, some good VODs over there, as of course you can ask me questions as well. So anyway, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.